Okay, today we're going to talk about factor by grouping. If you do not remember how to factor by finding common terms, you should go look up that video because we're going to assume that you already know how to do that. So when you factor by grouping, you're going to generally have four terms and you want to look at them in pairs. So I'm going to just rewrite the first pair. Oops, let's put the pen on. And the first pair we got is x to the third and 2x squared. And then we're going to look at the second pair, which is 2x plus 4. Now, the way factor by grouping works is you're going to look at each pair separately and just bring out anything in common. And it's not always the first pair and the second pair. Sometimes it's the first and the third, or the first and the fourth, and the middle two. You just play around with it until you can find a pair that work. Often we start with the first pair because that often works, but it doesn't always have to be the first pair. Sometimes it doesn't. But here I got a pair, 3 x's here, and there's 2 x's here, so we're going to bring a pair of x's out as x squared. And I'm left with x plus 2. And if I do it with the second one, there's a 2 in common here, so we'll bring the 2 out, and that leaves us with another x plus 2. Now here's the really important thing. You want to find what happened here, which is the same numbers repeated. This is why it's factored by grouping. You have to have a pair that are identical. When that pair is identical, you get to factor that out again as x plus 2, because each of these has an x plus 2 term, so it gets factored out. And anything you don't bring out gets left behind, so that's going to be the x squared and the 2. Okay, and then it ends up being factored like this. And you can switch the order. It could also be x squared plus 2, and then put the x plus 2 at the end. That's okay. But these are your two factored terms. So anything, you must have this thing that's in common. If you don't, then go try a different pair of numbers and see if you can do it. So that's the key thing for factor by grouping, is you have to have something in common, and that brings out as 1, and anything left behind becomes the other one. And then you should always go back and look at your two terms and see if there's anything else in common. This is x squared plus 2 has nothing in common, nothing I can think of right now that you can do with it, and that doesn't either. So we're going to call it good. Now I'm going to go ahead and look at solving this a second way and see if it works that way as well. No guarantee it will, but instead of looking at the first two terms, I'm going to look at the first and the third term. So I'm going to look at x cubed plus 2x, and then we'll look at the second and the fourth term. So we got 2x squared plus 4, and let's see if we can do it again. So in this case we have an x in common, so I bring the x out and I'm left with x squared plus 2. In this case, we have a 2 in common, and that leaves us an x squared plus 2. And just like before, we got a pair of things in common. So we're going to bring them out, x squared plus 2, and x plus 2 is the other terms. Okay, so it doesn't matter which one. Sometimes one way works and the other way doesn't. In this case, it works both ways. I'm going to look at another example over here. Again, I'm going to just pick the first two terms just for fun and see what we get. So we get 2x third minus 2x squared, and here we have 8x plus 8, and we're going to bring stuff out. Here I got a 2 in common, so I can bring the 2 out, and I have 2 x's and 3 x's, so we can bring a pair of x's out, and that leaves us with x minus 1. And this is not going to work because I can already tell ahead when I bring the 8 out, you're left with x plus 1. So let's try it the other way and see what's going on here. Maybe I screwed up when I wrote the original. Hopefully not. So let's try 2x to the third plus 8x. And the other one is going to be negative 2x squared plus 8. And I think we're going to have the same trouble. So I wonder what I did wrong. Oh, I see what I did wrong. On the original, I messed up, so let's fix it right now. This should be a negative right here. That should be right now. Alright, so let's try it again now that I got that fixed. In this particular case, you just would not be able to factor by grouping, so you'd have to use some other techniques that we'll learn later. But that's okay, because I want to show you what factor by grouping looks. So let's try this again. So we got 2x to the third minus 2x squared. And we got a negative 8x plus 8. And just like we said before, we have 2x squared in common, so that leaves us with x minus 2. And here what we have in common is going to be the 8, but in this case we don't want a negative here, so we'll bring the negative 8 out. And that's going to leave us x, and negative 8 times negative 1 is going to be that positive 8. Oh shoot, that should have been a 1 up there. I went too quickly. Let's check that. 2x squared times x is 2x to the third. 2x squared times 1 is 2x squared. That's good. Negative 8 times x is negative 8x. That's good. Negative 8 times negative 1 is positive 8. That's good. Okay, there we go. And now we have our pair of terms that are in common. Right here, x minus 1. So we'll bring the x minus 1 out front. And what's left behind is the 2x squared minus 8. Now, we got to check both to make sure that if there's anything else we can do. X minus 1 we're pretty much done with. This one we do have something in common. We have a 2 in common, so we're going to bring the 2 outside. When we bring it outside, we put it all the way out front. We don't leave it in the middle of a term. It's okay to do that. And what gets left behind is x squared minus 4. And we can check it. 2 times x squared is 2x squared, and 2 times 4 is 8. But this is a difference of squares. So if you remember how to do a difference of squares, it's a double set of parentheses. And then you look at the square root of x squared, which is x. And they both get one a plus, one a minus. And you look at the square root of 4, which is 2. And we're going to just rewrite everything else. And this is what it's fully factored as. So there's always stuff you can keep doing. So this is the factor by grouping step up here. But don't stop there if there's still things you can do using some other techniques. If you need a refresher on these other techniques, go and watch the other video. If you have any questions, please make sure you ask.